Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to a time when life was rough for everyone, but especially if you were born a little different. You're in a dim stone hut with cold straw under your swaddled body, and people are staring, not in a cute, "oh, baby" kind of way, more like, "what is it" kind of way. You're just a newborn, but already your fate is wobbling on the edge of a knife, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe, but only if what I create truly resonates with you. I'm building something meaningful here, and I want you with me for the ride. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it in your corner of the night? I'd love to know. Let the world slow down for a moment. Lights low, a soft breeze humming in the background. This is your time. Let's begin. You're born in the early 1300s. The midwives frown the moment they see your face. Round, soft, almond-eyed. They whisper to each other when your fingers seem shorter, your muscle tone a bit floppy. There's no diagnosis, no kind explanation. What you have, they can't name, but they can fear it. The village doesn't understand Down syndrome. They don't have a name for it. To them, you just look wrong. You don't cry like the others. You don't flail or fuss as expected. You sleep too deeply, and when you do open your eyes, they seem too calm for a newborn. It unnerves them. Your mother? She's exhausted. This is her 7th child, and 2 others didn't make it past infancy. She sees the midwife hesitate to wrap you. She notices the way the other women avoid eye contact. You don't know this yet, but in the Middle Ages, many babies like you didn't survive their first week. Infant mortality was sky high, even for the healthy ones. Historians still argue whether attitudes toward disabled infants were influenced more by superstition or practicality. But one thing's for sure, being born visibly different made you an immediate question mark, spiritually, socially and economically. People start whispering things like changeling, the idea that fairies had snatched the real baby and swapped in a strange stunted creature. It's not just a storybook tale, it was a deeply held belief in many parts of medieval Europe. So your mother, clinging to whatever maternal instinct she has left after 6 births and too many deaths, wraps you up herself. She notices your small hands, your strange little coos, and in some part of her, she knows life is about to get a lot harder. She names you something simple. Maybe it's Will or Elsa, names that can fade quietly, because drawing attention to you would be unwise. Even that act, giving you a name, might be seen as defying fate. In some villages, deformed or strange children weren't even baptized. Some priests refused. The logic? If your soul's already lost, what's the point? But your mother insists. She brings you to the tiny, icy church and begs the priest. He holds you reluctantly, mumbling Latin over your soft head, probably hoping not to catch anything. That's not how genetics work, obviously. But germ theory is a good 500 years away, so people play it safe with distance and prayer. You're wrapped tightly, swaddled more for silence than comfort. When visitors come, you're hidden in the back corner of the room. If someone asks, your mother says you're sleeping, even when your eyes are wide open. The more superstitious neighbours say you're touched, and there it is, that quiet medieval code word. Touched. By God? By demons? No one's sure. But it means you're not like the other children, and that scares people. There are no doctors, no therapies, no support systems, and don't get excited about medieval midwives. They're more likely to recommend tying garlic around your neck or bathing you in goat's milk than offering any real help. One old woman tells your mother to feed you ashes mixed with honey. It'll pull the spirit out, she says. From you or from the curse, it's not clear. You grow slowly. You don't sit up when others do. You don't babble much. When you try, your words are mushy and slow, and people begin using the word simple when they talk about you. In 14th century England, the term simple wasn't necessarily cruel, but it was limiting. You weren't expected to be useful, to learn a trade, to marry. Your entire future became a long grey hallway with no doors. One quirky belief at the time, that certain deformities were punishments for sins from a past life. That's right. Some medieval folks thought your squishy face meant you'd been a thief or heretic before, and now this was payback. Reincarnation was technically heretical, but hey, people were creative with their blame games. Your siblings don't quite know how to interact with you. Sometimes they play with you, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're told not to. You drool. You flap your hands when excited. You laugh at things others don't see. You become a mystery even in your own home. The animals understand you better. The family cat curls next to you in the cold nights. The goats let you tug on their fur without running. Maybe they know something the humans don't. You see, even from the start, your world is smaller, tighter, riskier. One fever could kill you. One rumour could exile you. And love? That's a luxury reserved for those who don't confuse or scare the neighbours. And yet, somehow, you survive infancy. Barely. You grow into a tottering child, clumsy and curious. You don't understand yet that every room you enter hushes slightly, that the old men cross themselves when you pass, that your name is often said in whispers, if it's said at all. Congratulations, you made it past the first hurdle, and you didn't even drool on the priest, but the Middle Ages are just getting started with you. You're maybe 3 now. Still small for your age, still soft in the face, with that unmistakable roundness that makes strangers pause. Your cheeks are like ripe apples, your limbs chubby and dimpled at the joints, the way all young children are, except you've stayed like this longer than most. Your eyes don't track quite right when people speak. Your tongue sometimes pokes out when you concentrate, and your words, if they come at all, arrive like lazy pebbles, not flowing streams. Short, clipped, often nonsensical. A language only you understand, and that's a problem. A big one. Because at this age, most medieval children are already tiny adults. They're feeding chickens, collecting firewood, watching the goats, or helping their mothers card wool. By 4, many are already contributing members of the household. But you struggle just to follow a conversation. You're slower, gentler, confusing. Your hands tremble when you try to thread twine or hold a wooden spoon. You don't like the feeling of rough wool on your skin. Sudden noises make you flinch or cry. Your laughter is too loud, too sudden, and sometimes happens when no one else finds anything funny. You are different, and difference, in this world, is dangerous. Your mother is tired. Again! Not metaphorically, like she's literally wiped out. She's trying to keep a fire going with damp wood, chase down your brother who's obsessed with climbing on the pig pen roof, and make some kind of stew out of yesterday's turnip water and a handful of limp carrots. Her apron is soaked from trying to wash out cloth nappies in freezing water, and her back aches from hauling buckets of slop to the pigs. And now you're whining because your cup tipped over, and your fingers can't grasp the handle the way the others can. She doesn't yell, but she also doesn't run over. Instead, she sighs, deep, bone-heavy, and sends your sister. That's how it starts. A slow slide from child to obligation. Your older siblings begin to view you not as the youngest, not even as a playmate, but as a permanent tag-along. You never stop needing. And in a medieval household, neediness is a luxury no one can afford. You can't be left alone, but no one wants to take you along. You're too small to help, but too old to be carried. A burden with legs, and it's about to get worse. You're sick again. Nothing dramatic, just a wet cough, a slight fever. But here, in a hut with no windows and too many draughts, a slight fever is no joke. There's mould in the thatch, dirt in the soup, and rats that chew at the corners of your straw bedding. Your skin is clammy, your eyes dull. You don't cry when your belly aches, and that scares your family more than if you had screamed. So they call for a wet nurse, someone with experience feeding sick or weak children. It's expensive. Your father has to barter several tools, and it costs a whole week's worth of firewood. But he makes the trip anyway, walking across muddy roads for hours. He returns with a stern woman named Johanna. She takes one look at you and doesn't unpack her things. She says you're elf-touched, which is not exactly a compliment. She won't feed a child marked by the Fae. She tells your mother she's risking all her children by letting you stay in the house. She insists you're cursed and suggests leaving you overnight at the edge of the woods. They'll take him back, she says, like you're an overdue library book. Your mother doesn't listen. Not yet. But the idea sticks like burrs in her apron. Historians still argue whether such folklore-driven neglect was widespread or anecdotal, but there's plenty of evidence that children with visible disabilities were abandoned, even ritually so. And while you're not thrown into the forest tonight, the message is clear. You're not safe, even in your own bed. And the whispers grow louder. The other villagers are starting to talk. People your parents trade with, people who come to your home. They notice how you move differently, how you mumble, how you don't look them in the eye. And those whispers, they're gaining traction, like mould spreading beneath the floorboards. Remember, this is an era when logic is usually outvoted by superstition. you drool in public, and someone's cow gives sour milk that same day. Suddenly, you're the prime suspect. You hum to yourself in the village square and someone's baby gets a rash. Well, coincidence isn't part of their worldview. You must have caused it. It must be you. There must be a reason you're so strange. A quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, people believed that if you left a changeling out in the rain overnight, the fairies would return the real child. There were recorded instances of families exposing children with disabilities to the elements on purpose to reverse the swap. And yes, it's as horrific as it sounds. So your parents start making compromises, little ones at first. You don't come to the market anymore. You stop attending church as often. You're kept indoors to rest, even though you're perfectly happy sitting in the dirt outside. They're not cruel about it, just cautious, quietly strategic. Their voice is lower when they speak about you, but never in front of strangers, especially not in front of the priest. Because no one wants to be the family with a cursed child. That kind of label sticks. It affects your ability to trade, to borrow, to marry off your other children. People are suspicious by default. Your very existence adds fuel to their bonfire of paranoia. They fear illness, bad luck, and divine punishment, and you're starting to look like a symbol of all three. One day, a travelling friar comes to town. He offers blessings, prayers, maybe a little amateur exorcism if the price is right. And guess what? He wants to lay hands on you. You're confused when they bring you out. Your tunic smells of smoke and sweat. He prays loudly. He presses his hands on your forehead and shouts Latin that sounds more angry than holy. You try to wiggle away. You don't like loud noises or strong smells. And this guy reeks of onions and unwashed wool. You cry. You scream. You scratch at your own arms until someone pulls you back. The friar insists you've been claimed by something unclean. He recommends herbs, fasting, and if that doesn't work, a brief separation from the family to let God's judgment pass. You have no idea what that means. But your mother hugs you a little tighter that night, and doesn't say why. You're still small, still not speaking much, and your teeth are late. Your baby hair falls out in strange clumps. People notice. And when people notice in the Middle Ages, they rarely offer support. They offer suspicion. One day, your cousin throws a rock at you. He says you laughed at nothing, and that's proof you see the spirits. Your sister tries to defend you, but she's younger, and no one listens. You end up with a bruise on your cheek and the first taste of being treated as something less than human. And your mother, she's starting to change too. She still loves you, probably. But now there's hesitation in her voice. A nervous glance when someone important visits. A sigh when you make a mess. You're not just a child anymore. You're a liability. A riddle that no one wants to solve. The household reshuffles. You wake up one morning to find your bed moved closer to the hearth. Not for warmth. To keep you away from the door. At meals your bowl comes last. Not because there isn't enough, yet. But because someone always forgets. Your name is spoken less. Sometimes replaced with him or the little one. Even your siblings have started to mimic it. You're not being raised. You're being managed. You don't know it yet, but you're beginning to disappear. And in this world, once people decide you're not meant to belong, they rarely change their minds. You're older now. Maybe 5, maybe 6. It's hard to tell because nobody's tracking birthdays. There are no cakes, no candles, no chalkboard signs with first day of being 6. Time is marked by harvests, by illnesses, by how tall the wheat gets, and who's still alive this spring. You're still alive, and that alone is noteworthy. But now, your differences aren't just whispered about. They've evolved, hardened, become facts, fixed and firm like stones in a wall. People have made up their minds. You aren't just slow anymore, you're other. At church, people avoid sitting near you. You giggle at the wrong moments. You stare at candle flames too long, mesmerised, swaying slightly like a reed in wind. Sometimes you clap your hands or rock back and forth when the choir sings. A few children think it's funny. Most adults find it unsettling. One old man, half blind and fully superstitious, swears you're looking through him when you smile. And the priest? He's conflicted. Some days he lays a heavy, calloused hand on your head and mutters something about the Lord's special lamb. Other days he fasts for 3 days straight after you come too close. It depends on whether there's been a full moon recently, apparently. You've heard the word changeling by now. You don't know exactly what it means, not in the way grown-ups mean it, but you know it's not a compliment. In Celtic and Germanic folklore, changelings were believed to be fairy impostors, mischievous creatures left behind by the Fae when they stole a real human child. Changelings were often described as odd-looking, slow-witted, prone to silence or sudden laughter. They were different. They were wrong. Sound familiar? To your neighbours, that myth makes more sense than any real-world explanation. The idea of a magical swap fits neatly into their worldview. It offers them a tidy reason for your strangeness, a satisfying scapegoat. He's not really theirs, they say behind closed doors. He was swapped. You're not sure what you were swapped for, but from the way they talk, it clearly wasn't a great deal. There's another explanation circulating too, one darker, one that stains the soul more than folklore ever could. Some whisper that you're proof of God's punishment. Maybe your parents sinned. Maybe you sinned before birth. Some medieval theologians believed that deformity or deficiency was evidence of divine disapproval, that you were born this way because God was making a point. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were rooted in scripture, local superstition, or just centuries of cruelty masquerading as faith. But the result is the same. You are marked. Not with a brand or a scar, but with suspicion, with fear, with rejection. And if the fairy explanation sounds whimsical, it's not. People genuinely believed you could force a changeling to reveal its true self by placing it near hot iron tongs or tossing it across a fire. These weren't just threats. These were recorded practices, real things people tried. You haven't been tossed yet, but you've learned to flinch when voices rise. You start noticing that even your siblings treat you differently. They no longer try to include you in games. When you attempt to join, they give you the roles that don't matter. Hold this bucket. Watch the dog. Sit here and don't move. Sometimes they're kind, sometimes not. But either way you understand. You're not part of their world. You're tolerated, managed, and not included. Your father rarely looks at you anymore. Not out of hate, but out of helplessness. He's a man of soil and sweat and sunburnt hands. He builds things, fixes things. He knows how to raise livestock and patch roofs and carve a toy from wood. But he doesn't know how to raise you. You're not a boy who will grow into a tradesman. You're not a girl who will wed and bear children. You're something else. A question without an answer. A path with no destination. Your mother tries. At first. She keeps holding on, tightening her grip as the current pulls. But it's hard. You don't speak clearly. You wander when you shouldn't. You don't understand how to keep quiet when guests arrive, or how to stop touching the firewood, or why the baby shouldn't be poked in the eye. You're unpredictable. And in the Middle Ages, unpredictability is dangerous. So your family leans into routine, not to nurture you, but to contain you. You're given simple, repetitive tasks. Shell peas, sort stones from lentils, feed the chickens, again and again and again. If you do them wrong, it's fine. They weren't important anyway. What matters is that you're occupied, that you stay put, that you don't bring shame or suspicion to the doorstep, but it doesn't stop people from noticing. One merchant refuses to come near the house anymore. Says his cart lost a wheel just after passing your lane. Coincidence? Maybe. But in this time period, coincidence is basically just witchcraft with plausible deniability. Gossip spreads like fungus. You laugh in your sleep one night, loudly, joyfully. The neighbour hears and swears it was a demon's cackle. By morning, people are treating your home like it's contagious. The baker forgets to deliver flour. The shepherd crosses himself when he sees your shadow. The midwife says nothing, but she starts avoiding your mother's eyes. And you don't quite understand. You're still just trying to figure out why no one laughs when you do. One rainy evening, your mother finds you outside, knee-deep in mud, talking to the chickens. You're making up songs, joyful ones. You're happy. She watches for a moment, smiles, then remembers herself, and scolds you, loudly, too loudly. Because if someone else had seen, they might have taken it the wrong way. Singing to birds, talking nonsense. That's the stuff of Fae, of madness. You flinch, you stop singing. And for the first time, you go quiet for days. Here's a quirky detail. Some medieval families believed a changeling could be revealed by cooking in an eggshell. Why? Who knows? Maybe someone tried it, and when the baby didn't shout, "Aha, you've caught me," they figured they just hadn't boiled hard enough. You're lucky. Your family hasn't tried that yet. But then comes the travelling healer, a woman with a cart full of roots, dried petals, and tiny bones. She wears bells that jingle ominously. She listens to your mother describe you. Quiet now, distant, strange, and nods as if she's heard it all before. Then she digs through her bag and pulls out a pouch that smells like feet and dead moss. "Boil this under the full moon," she instructs. "Pour it on the boy's head while whispering Psalm 59 backwards." Your mother tries it. Nothing happens, except your hair smells worse than usual. Your siblings make jokes, quiet ones. You don't laugh. After that, your mother stops trying quite as hard. She still feeds you, still tucks you in. But something in her has dimmed. The hope, maybe. The hope that you'll snap out of it, or be healed, or become normal. Now she doesn't try to fix you. She tries to hide you. There's less laughter in the house, more nervous glances, more hushed conversations when they think you're asleep. Less, maybe he just needs time. More, what do we do with him? Then one day, you're left home alone while everyone else goes to market. Not forgotten, just strategically excluded. You sit by the fire for hours, humming to yourself, staring at the shadows on the wall, waiting for someone to come back. You aren't scared, just confused. You don't understand what you did wrong, but you know, somehow, that you did. And outside, the whispers continue to multiply, louder now, echoing, gaining shape. You're left alone in the house. At first it feels like a treat. No chores, no sisters pushing you away, no one tugging your arm and barking orders you don't fully understand. Just the fire crackling in the hearth and the familiar scent of smoked meat and old straw. But slowly, the quiet shifts. It stretches too long. You realise they didn't just forget you. They chose to leave you behind. You stand at the door, press your cheek to the wood. You don't cry. You don't really know how to name what you're feeling. But it hums in your chest. A heavy, buzzing thing that doesn't go away even when the others return with laughter and bread. This is your new normal. You're not forbidden from joining, not officially. But you're excluded the same way fog excludes a mountain view. Just gently enough to pretend it's not happening. You get the broken toys, the last bite, the chores no one else wants, the silences after your laughter, and outside, the village isn't much better. A few kids try to mimic how you speak. They think it's hilarious. They slur their words, stagger like they're dizzy, and then burst out laughing. It doesn't feel mean at first, until they do it again, and again, and again, when you're not even there. One day, a boy sneaks up behind you, throws a beat at your head and shouts, "Give the fairies their monster back." You don't know what it means. But the other kids laugh, so you try to laugh too, and that somehow makes it worse. Your siblings don't intervene. Not because they hate you, but because your difference has become exhausting. A never-ending source of awkwardness and risk. They don't bully you, but they definitely don't defend you either. And it's not just children. There's a blacksmith's apprentice who swears you blink too slowly. He tells people you smell of prophecy, which would be cool if he meant it like a wizard, but no, he means cursed. He warns others to keep their babies away from you. One time you accidentally wander into the smithy, fascinated by the glowing forge. The blacksmith hurls a ladle at you, not to scare you, to hit you. It misses, barely. But your mother hears about it, and instead of marching over to defend you, she pulls you closer and says, "Don't go there again," as if you were the one who did something wrong. A mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, it wasn't uncommon for people with disabilities to be accused of supernatural ties, especially in rural areas. Though some monasteries and royal courts offered rudimentary care, village life often meant exclusion, mockery, or worse. Historians still argue whether these behaviours were driven more by ignorance or by economic practicality. Because let's face it, resources were tight, and a child who couldn't contribute was considered a drain, not a dependent. So, what happens to you? Well, you become a ghost inside your own home. You're there, but you're not included. You sit near the hearth, but never in the middle. You eat after the others. You hear plans whispered when they think you're asleep. You're old enough now to realise that you're not wanted in every room you enter, that when adults lower their voices, they're usually talking about you. And the strange thing is, you start to adapt. Your brain, bless it, begins to build a world inside. A softer, kinder version of your village. One where the chickens talk back and the sky changes colour depending on your mood. One where you belong. You hum to yourself more often. You speak to objects. You dance when no one's watching. You become wonderfully weird, but the kind of weird that doesn't have a place at the dinner table. Your siblings start calling you Foghead, sometimes playfully, sometimes not. One night, you hear your brother ask your mother if you'll ever be normal. She doesn't answer right away. When she finally speaks, she just says, "God makes all kinds." You want that to mean something kind. But her voice doesn't sound kind when she says it. Let's talk about that God for a moment. Religious explanations are all anyone has. There's no diagnosis, no understanding of Down syndrome, no genetics, no neurology. Just scripture and superstition. And depending on the priest, that either makes you a holy innocent or a walking omen. A quirky tidbit? In some areas, people believed that the mentally disabled could speak the language of angels, which sounds beautiful, until you realise they meant it as a reason to fear you. After all, who knows what the angels might say through your mouth? You once babble during a feast, smiling as you list off the names of animals you love. The room goes quiet. You think it's because they're impressed. Later, you learn someone thought you were channeling a dead relative. From then on, people treat your words like omens, or nonsense, nothing in between. You're 8 now, probably, maybe older. No one celebrated a birthday, remember? But your clothes don't fit right anymore. You're growing. And with that growth comes the expectation that you should be more coherent, more useful, more controllable, but you aren't. You're still you. So what do? They try to train you, not lovingly, not patiently, more like training a mule. You're told to repeat prayers, to hold your spoon correctly, to say please and thank you even when you don't understand why. And when you mess up, someone, usually your father, gets frustrated. One day he smacks your hand when you drop a bowl. Not hard, just enough to make you gasp. And suddenly, you're very still. That stillness becomes your default. You start hiding parts of yourself. The laughter, the movement, the odd gestures. You fold inward like a tired flower. It's safer that way. But safety, as it turns out, is a short-term illusion. Because one morning you wake up and your blanket is missing. Your mother says she needed it for your baby sister. You understand, but you also don't. You shiver in silence. That's the day you realise something important. You're not just different. You're less. The truth of your place settles in slowly, like a cold draught through the stone walls. You're not exactly hated, not exactly loved. You're tolerated. And in the Middle Ages, being tolerated is as close to invisible as a person can get while still breathing. You're around 10 now, or near enough. You've stopped asking to join games. You've stopped offering your funny songs and stories. You've learned, brilliantly, painfully, how to predict the moment before a laugh turns cruel. How to spot the tiny shifts in a room that mean leave now. Your family doesn't mistreat you, not outright. But they've developed that careful, practiced indifference. They feed you, clothe you. But everything is slightly less than what it could be. The bread crust is thinner. The shirt is a hand-me-down from 2 siblings ago. The praise is mostly silence. And silence, you've learned, is a language all its own. Outside, the village is changing. Or maybe you are. You start to notice things others miss, like how Father Bernard won't meet your eyes anymore, or how the butcher's wife always makes the sign of the cross when you pass, even when she's not near the church. You try not to take it personally, but then again, you're 10. Everything is personal. Mainstream historical fact. By the High Middle Ages, European villages operated with strict roles. You were a peasant, a lord, a knight, a monk, a servant, or a burden. Guess which box they've shoved you into. And here's a delightful fringe detail. In some corners of medieval Europe, especially among Germanic tribes, people believed a changeling could be driven out by exposing it to nature, literally leaving the child in the forest, hoping the fairies would return the real one. That's right, a little forest swapperoo with 0 scientific backing and 100% child endangerment. You're lucky. That hasn't happened to you yet. But one afternoon, your older brother says something like, "If you wandered off into the woods, I wonder if you'd even notice." He laughs. You don't. Because you have thought about it. Many times, you've wandered a few steps into the edge of the forest behind your house. Not to run away, just to listen. The trees feel honest. They don't expect you to speak clearly. The wind doesn't laugh when you mutter. And the birds don't care if you flap your arms back at them. So you start escaping there more often. At first, just after chores, then before them, Then in the middle of the night, barefoot and cold, but pulled by something you can't name, that forest becomes your safest place, and then someone ruins it. It starts when a neighbour's goat goes missing, a prized animal. Disappeared right after you were seen in the woods again. Within hours, whispers bloom like mould. They say he talks to animals. I saw him stroking moss like it was a baby's head. He was muttering spells last week. You weren't, but no one cares. Historians still argue whether village paranoia like this was born more from desperation than malice. After all, in a world ruled by weather, war and wild dogs, blaming the strange boy for your bad luck probably felt like control. You're confronted in public, for the first time. A group of boys, older than you, sharper than you, corner you near the well. One accuses you of witchcraft, another tells you to say something in demon. You don't understand what they want, so you just smile. That was the wrong choice. A stone hits your side, not hard enough to injure, just enough to announce itself. Then another. You don't cry, not because you're brave, but because your body doesn't even register this as surprising. Pain isn't new, confusion isn't new, cruelty in the shape of laughter, practically a love language by now. The stones stop when an old woman shouts from a doorway. She doesn't defend you, she just says, "Not by the well, idiots. That's drinking water. You're not worth protecting, but you're worth relocating for hygiene. You go home bruised and quiet. Your mother sees the marks. Her mouth twitches, but she doesn't ask. She just puts more porridge in your bowl and walks away. You learn to keep your head down even lower." Here's the wild twist. The church sometimes saw people like you as innocents, incapable of sin. In some haphazard cases, priests or monks took in children with disabilities, thinking they were closer to God. But only if the child was quiet. Still, easy. You're not easy. You laugh too loud. You touch things too much. You wander. You remind people they don't know everything. And in an age obsessed with order, that's terrifying. So you start getting threats, small ones, mumbled ones. You better behave or Father Bernard will send you to the abbey. Keep making faces and we'll lock you in the barn with the pigs. One time, a younger cousin tells you, very seriously, that the devil is hiding in your belly and might jump out if you sneeze too hard. You sneeze a lot more quietly after that. Let's lighten it, sort of. A fringe theory claimed that the mentally impaired were touched by elves, which in Norse-influenced areas could be either a blessing or a curse depending on which elf was allegedly involved. You probably got the chaotic neutral one. Mischievous, glittery, but ultimately terrible at public relations. So where does that leave you? At the margins, always watching, always absorbing. You become uncannily aware of other people's moods. You learn the twitch before a slap, the sigh before dismissal, the way someone's jaw sets when they're deciding whether to include you, and your inner world grows richer. Your stories become more complex. You invent names for birds. You hum lullabies to shadows. You imagine a better village, one where people wear crowns made of ivy and understand every word you say. But none of those people live here. And eventually, someone makes a decision. They say you should be sent to help at the church. Just a few hours a day. A mercy, they say. It'll teach him something, they say. You don't know what that means, but you nod. Because in your world, nodding is safer than asking. The church is colder than you expect. Not just because of the stone walls, which never quite remember sunlight, but because of the silence. A different kind of silence than the one at home. This one is deliberate, weighted, watchful. You step inside like you're entering someone else's dream. Candles flicker. Dust floats like old ghosts. And somewhere beneath the echo of your own footsteps, there's the scent of wax, mildew, and something vaguely like fear. They've sent you to Father Bernard. He's not the worst man. But he's not the best either. He has that particular middle-aged monk energy. Tired of everyone, but especially tired of things that don't follow rules. You don't follow rules. Not out of rebellion, but because half the time, no one explains them. Or they do, but the words tangle in your brain and never quite reach the part that knows what's expected. Your job, though no one actually calls it that, is to help clean the altar steps and fetch water from the well behind the chapel. It's not hard work, not by medieval standards, but you still get it wrong. You sweep the dust into little spirals, not neat piles. You murmur little tunes when you're supposed to be quiet. And when you touch the carved wooden crucifix above the altar, Father Bernard says sharply, "That's not for play." You weren't playing, you just liked the texture. Still, you learn quickly that liking things is suspicious when you're you. Mainstream historical fact: medieval churches often doubled as community centres, places for both charity and control. Poor children, especially those deemed simple, were sometimes allowed inside the fold, but only in tightly defined roles. Sweepers, bell pullers, or more bleakly, objects of pity to inspire almsgiving. You become a little bit of all three. Most days people ignore you. Some days they stare. One time you see a noblewoman kneeling in prayer, her rich cloak puddling like spilled wine on the stone floor. She glances back, sees you watching her, and actually flinches, as if your eyes are daggers. Afterward she asks Father Bernard if the boy really needs to be here. He says something soft and priestly, but later he tells you to use the side entrance from now on. Just like that, even in God's house, you're back to the side door. You're 11, maybe 12. The years are getting harder to track because no one really marks yours, but your body is changing, growing longer, ganglier, less child-shaped, and with that comes new suspicion. Your hands shake more now. Your speech sometimes slurs when you're tired. You fidget, rock, hum, twist your fingers when the world gets too loud. These behaviours were odd before. Now people call them dangerous. One Sunday, you sit near the back during Mass. Not to pray. You've never really understood the words, but because the singing is nice and you like the flicker of candles. During a quiet moment, you make a soft chirping sound with your lips. It just slips out. Half the pew turns to stare. Father Bernard pauses his sermon. You smile apologetically, but it's too late. Afterward, a woman tells your mother, "He shouldn't be inside. It makes people nervous." To which your mother says nothing. Not "he meant no harm." Not "he's just a boy." Just that long sigh you've come to dread. The kind that says, "What can I do with this creature I gave birth to?" Quirky tidbit time. In parts of rural France, some churches kept simpletons as unofficial mascots, blessing them for harvest luck, parading them during feast days, then quietly forgetting them the rest of the year. You're not quite lucky enough to be parade material. Instead, you become part of the church's furniture. Quiet, repetitive, neither loved nor loathed, just there. One day, a travelling friar visits. He's loud and funny, with bright eyes and dirt under his nails. He tells stories in the square about saints who walked on water and monks who fought dragons. You watch from the edge, enraptured. He notices. After the crowd disperses, he kneels beside you and says, "What's your name, lad?" You tell him. He repeats it slowly, carefully, like he's trying not to crush it. Then he says, "You see things differently, don't you?" You nod, wary. He smiles. That's not a curse, you know. You want to believe him. Truly. But then he leaves, and no one else ever says anything like that again. Historians still argue whether travelling friars helped or harmed people like you. Some spread kindness, others spread fear dressed up as doctrine. The man you met, he gave you something rare, the feeling that maybe you weren't broken. Just rare. It doesn't last, because just when you start to feel almost okay in your small routine, someone decides it's time for a test. They ask you to help prepare the altar for Holy Week. It's a big deal. Linens, candles, the works. You try your best. You really do. But during the setup, you knock over a silver candle holder. It clatters, echoes, dents the floor. Everyone freezes. Then Father Bernard sighs, that sigh again, and says, "Maybe this was a mistake." You are dismissed, not yelled at, not punished, just gently erased from the schedule, like a smudge on parchment. No more church duty for you. No more side door. No more flickering candles and quiet humming beneath the nave. You're back at home now, all the time. And somehow, it feels worse than before. Because you almost had a place, and now, even that's gone. You start to retreat again. Not just into the woods, but into yourself. You talk less, listen more. You develop entire conversations in your head with imaginary people. Some kind, some funny, some made of light. They always understand you, always laugh at the right times, always wait for your answers. But in the real world, no one waits. Your siblings are getting older, taking on apprenticeships, marrying, moving away, and you're not going anywhere. Your mother says it one day, without cruelty, just fact. He'll stay here, help where he can, as if you're a piece of furniture, a bench that sometimes carries water. You're becoming background, fading into the wallpaper of your own life, and no one seems to notice. You're 13 now, or something near it, and by this point, you've become exceptionally good at disappearing. Not vanishing, exactly. You're still physically present, a gangly, awkward figure in the corner of the room or out by the sheepfold. But your presence causes so little disruption, so little stir, it's as if you've trained the world to unsee you. It's a skill, one you never meant to learn. You carry water, sweep floors, collect eggs. You even help your father mend fences, though he mostly trusts you with the easier tasks, things that won't break if you do them your own way, like counting chickens or stirring porridge, but never anything involving fire or blades. Definitely not livestock birthing season. You're helpful, but not trusted. Familiar, but not quite family. People start using phrases like "bless his heart" when they talk about you. You know the tone. It's the same one used when a horse breaks its leg and no one says the word butcher. It's pity, but smudged over with politeness. Your sisters whisper about marriage, about dowries and good husbands. One of them even jokes, "At least I won't end up stuck at home forever like him." She says it lightly, like it's a lark, but her eyes dart when they land on you. She knows you heard. Mainstream historical fact. In most peasant households, children with disabilities weren't necessarily institutionalized. There weren't even proper institutions to begin with, but they were often kept. Not imprisoned, just contained. No real schooling, no future planned, no expectations beyond survival and minimal disruption. But it's not all grim. In your strange, quiet way, you've built little systems of joy. You name each of the chickens after people in the village and give them dramatic personalities. You press flower petals into the cracks in the floorboards. You hum songs in rhythms that make sense only to you, but to you they are symphonies. You are, in the ways that matter most, deeply alive. And yet, the world keeps treating you like a ghost who didn't get the memo. Let's toss in a quirky tidbit to spice things up. There was a real superstition in 14th century England that idiots, their charming word, not ours, could see fairies. Not just pretend, not imaginary friends, actual fairies. Some villagers even left offerings near people like you, hoping you'd pass along messages to the unseen folk. You never see anyone leaving you cakes or coins, but you do feel a little magic sometimes, especially when the wind moves the wheat just right, or when the rain drips down the thatched roof in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. Still, the world isn't impressed by your poetic soul. Around this time, a travelling tinker visits the village. He's got pots, pans and stories. Always stories. You watch him from afar, of course. Everyone watches the tinker, but he sees you. He calls out, "Oi lad, come help me with this buckle." You blink, then point to yourself, just to make sure. He laughs. "Yes, you. Come on, unless you're a ghost, in which case I'll need a different kind of help." You shuffle over, unsure. He hands you a strange buckle with a twisty hinge. You don't know why, but it fascinates you. You flip it back and forth, the metal clicking in your palm. The tinker says, "Try putting that on the strap," and you do. Perfectly. He whistles. "Smart fingers, eh? You learn fast." No one has said that to you. Not once. You glow like a candle stub catching a second wind. For the next hour you follow him, handing him tools, holding bits of leather, mimicking his movements, and he never flinches. Never corrects you harshly. Never sighs like you're exhausting. When he leaves, he claps you on the shoulder and says, "You're not broken, boy. Just sideways, that's all." You repeat that to yourself 100 times that week, but then life shrinks again. Your world, already narrow, becomes a corridor. And then comes the boy. He's not from the village, just visiting. Maybe a cousin of someone, and he's bright-eyed, confident, loud. He sees you one morning picking dandelions and asks, "Why do you talk funny?" You say nothing. He leans closer. "Do you even understand me?" Still nothing. He laughs and says, "You're like a dog. You hear sounds, but you don't get words." And just like that, your silence becomes a collar. Historians still argue whether children with disabilities were seen as divine innocence or subhuman embarrassments in most medieval communities. The answer, frustratingly, seems to be both, depending on the season, the crop yield, and the mood of the parish priest. That evening, you overhear your parents whispering. Something about usefulness and what happens when we're gone. You only catch bits. burden. Maybe the Abbey can't do this forever. Their voices sound tired. But what echoes loudest is a sentence your father says so softly it feels like a betrayal. He'll never have a life. You pretend not to have heard, but you did. You stopped talking for 3 days. Not as a rebellion, not even as a choice. Just silence. Like your mouth forgot what language was for. And in that silence, your mind becomes louder than ever. You picture running away, living with the tinker, sleeping under stars, fixing buckles, making up songs for coins. You imagine a town where no one knows your name, so no one expects you to be broken. But fantasy fades when faced with reality, especially when you don't know how to get to the next town without ending up in a ditch. So you stay. You always stay. Even when your cousin gets apprenticed to the blacksmith. Even when your neighbour's daughter gets married and leaves with a cart full of dreams. Even when your youngest sibling starts correcting your chores like they're the older one. You remain. But one afternoon, while kneeling in the garden, you dig up something strange. A tiny rusted coin. It gleams faintly in the dirt, whispering stories you can't hear fully but feel. You decide it's magic. You tuck it in your tunic pocket and think, maybe it's a sign. Maybe. It starts with a sheep. Because in medieval villages, everything either starts or ends with a sheep. One morning your father tells you to follow the flock. Just keep them moving, he says, like it's simple. But of course, the sheep don't get the memo and neither does your brain. So, while you're watching a beetle inch its way across a mossy rock, the sheep meander somewhere decidedly unhelpful, specifically into Widow Orla's garden. Widow Orla is not the forgiving type. She storms out waving a ladle, hollering things you only half understand but fully recognise as not compliments. You try to round the sheep up. Really you do, but your arms get tangled and your voice comes out too soft and weird, and the animals just bleat at you like they're mocking your very existence. When it's over, Orla marches straight to your parents' door. She doesn't knock. She announces, "He ruined my turnips. That one. He's not right in the head, and he's a menace." Your mother apologises. Your father grinds his teeth. And you? You stand there with a beetle still clinging to your finger, wondering if any of this is actually your fault, or if it just feels like it. Mainstream historical fact. In many rural medieval communities, property was sacred. Even a few crushed turnips could incite neighbourly feuds that lasted generations. People had been stabbed over cabbage. The bar was low and bloody. After the incident, your responsibilities shrink even more. No sheep, no chores that involve moving objects larger than a bucket. No walking into the village alone. You're on house arrest without the chains. The term people start using around you, never to you, is useless. Useless boy. Useless mouth. Useless hands. You start whispering it to yourself sometimes. Like a nickname. Like a curse you're trying to tame. And then something even worse happens. They try to be nice. Well-meaning villagers start offering pity instead of insults. They bring you stale bread. They tousle your hair like you're 4 years old. One even says, "You're lucky, you know. You'll never have to work yourself to death like the rest of us." You smile politely. Inside, something curls up and hides. You stop naming the chickens. You stop humming your favourite tune. The little coin you found? You bury it again, under the willow tree by the stream. It didn't bring magic after all. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers considered disability divine punishment, karmic debt, or just a twist of fate. The truth is likely a cocktail of all three, with a twist of personal inconvenience. One afternoon, while you're stacking firewood badly, a boy named Rafe walks by. He's your age, maybe younger, a shepherd's son with a laugh like thunder. He watches you fumble a log, then says, "You ever wonder what it would be like if you were normal?" He doesn't mean it cruelly, just curious. You shrug. He tosses a stick at your feet. "I'd teach you to whistle proper, if you didn't sound like a dying crow." You grin in spite of yourself. For a few weeks, Rafe sticks around. Not every day, but often enough to feel like something new. He teaches you how to flick pebbles with your thumb and how to fake a sneeze to get out of boring chores. You share bread. Laugh at shadows. Pretend, just for a while, that you belong. Quirky tidbit time. In some medieval German villages, there were records of local fools or differently abled people being adopted into informal friendship groups. Not quite equals, but not entirely excluded. Some even had their own nicknames, like Blessed Tom or Merry Nell. These weren't always insults. Sometimes they were shields. You start to think maybe you could be quiet your name, or quick hands. Something kind, but of course it doesn't last. Nothing ever does. One day, Rafe's older brother sees the two of you sitting by the stream, tossing pebbles and making weird bird noises together. He sneers and says, "Why are you wasting time with a half-wit?" Rafe shrugs. He's funny. The brother says, "He's broken." Rafe doesn't answer. He doesn't come back after that. You wait 3 days, then 5, then stop counting. There's no fight, no farewell, just absence, like a curtain drawn across a window. Your mother notices you moping and says, "Don't be so dramatic." You want to say, "I wasn't being dramatic, I was being alive." But your words tangle on the way out, so you just nod, and that's when you start wandering deeper into the woods. Not running away, not exactly, just walking until the trees blur together and the light gets soft and strange. You like the hush of the moss underfoot, the thrill of spotting mushrooms with orange caps and tree trunks shaped like sleeping giants. Here, the world doesn't expect anything from you, except not to get eaten by wolves. That part you manage. One evening, deep in the forest, you find an old hut, collapsed, half buried in ivy, with bones of past fires and a pot still hanging over the long-dead hearth. You sit on the stone step and close your eyes, and for just a moment you imagine staying here forever, becoming a woodland hermit, letting your hair grow wild, learning to speak squirrel. Honestly, it sounds like an upgrade, but you can't do it, not because you're scared, though you are, but because no one would notice, and that would be worse than anything else. Historians still argue whether neurodivergent individuals in the Middle Ages were capable of autonomy. The records usually show them as dependent, sheltered, or simply erased. But that's not the whole truth, is it? Not when your heart beats so loudly with longing for something. That night, back at home, you lie awake and stare at the ceiling. You try to imagine the future, but it's a blank wall. Nothing changes. No new chapters, just chores, sighs, ghosthood. Until one morning, a rider comes through the village, a monk by the look of him, travelling alone. He talks to your parents in hushed tones. You hear the words sanctuary and Benedictines and special place for boys like him. You know they mean you. Something is about to change, and for once you don't know if it's a curse or a chance. You're standing in the courtyard, hands tucked into your sleeves, watching the monk's mule chew like it has all the time in the world. It smells like wet wool and dusty parchment. The monk, Brother Aldrich, soft-spoken, soft-faced, has a voice like dry leaves in wind. Kind but papery. You like the sound of it, even if you don't trust what it means yet. Your mother won't meet your eyes. Your father keeps saying things like, "It'll be good for him, and he'll learn a trade, and they've had success with others like..." Then his voice trails off into uncomfortable air. You've been like something your whole life, but never quite someone. Mainstream historical fact. By the High Middle Ages, monasteries across Europe, especially those under the Benedictine and Cistercian orders, had begun accepting disabled individuals, particularly boys and young men. Not necessarily out of kindness, but out of religious duty. The Church believed caring for the imperfect was part of their holy mission, though what that care looked like varied wildly. The abbey they're sending you to is a day's ride away. That's practically the moon. You don't own much, just a satchel, a bread crust, and the tiny clay token Rafe made you before he vanished. It's misshapen, sun-baked, and cracked down the middle. You clench it like a secret as you climb onto the cart, and just like that, you leave. No fanfare, no hugs, not even a proper goodbye. The road is long and bumpy. Brother Aldrich hums tunelessly as you pass barley fields, sleepy sheep, and the occasional shrine stuffed with waxy candles and mildew. You catch glimpses of things you've never seen. Stone bridges, water wheels, a man juggling knives badly. And for the first time in your life you feel like you're part of something bigger. You imagine what the abbey will look like. Grand halls, gleaming candles, rows of silent boys like you, speaking in hand gestures and secret glances. Or maybe they'll put you in a cellar and forget to feed you. Both feel equally plausible. But when you arrive, it's different. The Abbey of St. Gervais rises from the hills like a sleeping lion, big but crumbling. The walls lean slightly, the bells are cracked. The monks look like they were baked too long in the sun. Still, it's not unkind. You're ushered through the cloister, where ivy climbs the stone like it's trying to escape. The garden smells of mint and overripe figs. A nun feeds birds from her palm and nods when she sees you. The birds don't flee. That feels like a good sign. Quirky tidbit for you. One famous Benedictine monastery in Cluny, France, had a cat sanctuary, and the monks actually gave the cats names from scripture. You half hope Saint-Gervais has something similar. You wouldn't mind spending the next decade in the company of pious tabbies. You're introduced to Brother Lucas, who oversees the special novices. That's the term they use. Like a title. Like a diagnosis in italics. He gives you a bedroll and a bowl and says, "We'll see what you're good at." Then he points to a squat building that smells strongly of beeswax. Inside are 5 other boys, some older, one much younger. One rocks gently and repeats the same phrase, "Bell rings, bread time," over and over like it's a prayer. Another stares at his hand as if it's made of stars, and none of them laugh when you speak. They listen. You're stunned into quiet. Historians still argue whether institutions like this were safe havens or quiet prisons. Records from monastic schools are notoriously vague. Some show successful integration into monastic life. Others hint at neglect, even abuse. What you know, right now, is that this feels like a strange kind of breath. You're assigned basic duties: candle trimming, linen folding, helping in the scriptorium. You learn how to make ink from oak galls and wine dregs, how to sand a page with powdered pumice. You fall in love with the scratching sound of quills on parchment. One day, Brother Lucas places a blank page in front of you and says, "Draw." You hesitate. He repeats, "Whatever's in your head." So you do. At first, it's stick figures with very weird hats. Then animals, slightly mutated, slightly hilarious. Then something astonishing. A perfect sketch of the garden's willow tree, its branches bending exactly as they do in the late afternoon wind. Brother Lucas studies your work. He doesn't praise you. He just hands you another sheet. This becomes your rhythm. Days marked by ink and wax and whisper songs. Nights filled with candlelight and soft prayers you barely understand but somehow feel. Then something shifts. Brother Lucas brings a visitor into your workspace, an old friar with a long neck and sharper eyes than you'd expect from someone with eyebrows that resemble angry caterpillars. He studies your drawings and mutters, "He sees in layers." You're not sure if that's good or not. The next week you're asked to help copy a manuscript. Not just any manuscript, a bestiary. Pages of mythical creatures and bizarre commentary. The first animal you're assigned? A basilisk, which, according to the scribe's note, can kill with a glance but fears the crow of the rooster. You laugh out loud at that. Brother Lucas joins in. It's the first time anyone's laughed with you in ever. You're still not sure what all of this means, but you're not picking turnips. You're not the village ghost. You're someone. Still, it's not perfect. You're mocked by older acolytes who think you're favoured. One calls you the idiot illuminator. Another flicks ink at you during Vespers. You don't retaliate. Not because you're noble, but because confrontation makes your whole body twist into knots. Instead, you focus. You draw. You listen. You memorize the feeling of peace, even when it's brittle. And late one night, while tracing a dragon onto parchment, you feel something shift deep in your chest. A little voice, yours but braver, whispers, "Maybe I was never broken, just untranslatable." That thought alone carries you through the rest of the week. The bells wake you before the sun. Matins. You shuffle out of your straw-stuffed mattress, toes meeting cold stone, joints creaking like the abbey itself. Monastic life is ruled by time. Bells for prayer, bells for meals, bells for everything. You're starting to feel like a chicken in a very pious coop. Still, there's something comforting about the rhythm. Predictable. Software. Like the thump of your own heart when you're not being chased by shame or bad luck. You sit in the chapel, tucked in the back row, not because you're told to, but because it's safest there. From behind, you can watch without being watched. A survival tactic turned into a habit. Brother Lucas gives you a subtle nod as the chant begins. Gregorian, of course. Latin, of course. You don't understand most of it, but the sounds feel like honey poured into the cracks of your skull. Smooth, strange, healing. Mainstream historical fact. The rule of St. Benedict dictated a strict daily schedule in monastic communities. 7 prayer services a day, starting as early as 2:30 a.m. This meant monks, including novices like you, spent more time in sacred chant than in actual sleep. Some called it devotion, others called it torture with better acoustics. After prayers, it's back to the scriptorium. The sun finally yawns over the horizon, spilling light onto the rows of desks like someone painted the floor with gold. You like the scriptorium. It smells of vellum and patience. Your job today is to gild capital letters, tiny squares of gold leaf, breath-held stillness, and the softest of brushes. You love this work. It doesn't care if you slur your speech or laugh at the wrong time. It only wants your hands, your eyes, and your quiet awe. But just as you're tracing an R shaped like a heron, trouble waddles in. Brother Tancred. A young monk with a voice like scraped bark and a temper that could curdle goat milk. He never liked you. You suspect he thinks you're taking up space meant for someone holier, or at least less prone to humming while working. Today he stops at your desk and scowls. "This isn't your place," he mutters. "You're not one of us." You keep painting. He leans closer. You think because you can draw birds you're chosen? You don't answer. Not because you're wise, but because you're worried if you open your mouth you'll say something like birds are cooler than monks, and that's not the kind of theology the Abbey appreciates. Quirky tidbit? In some medieval monasteries, scribes hid tiny drawings called marginalia in the borders of illuminated manuscripts. Rabbits jousting with snails, monks battling giant insects, cats playing lutes. No one really knows why. Some say it was secret rebellion. Others think it was just boredom given ink. You've started doing your own marginalia. Little hidden creatures in the corners, a fox drinking wine, a snail wearing a crown, a cat flipping Brother Tancred the middle paw. It helps. Historians still argue whether such fool's art was tolerated or quietly erased. You're hoping yours survives. Maybe someone will laugh in 100 years. Maybe they'll feel less alone. After the confrontation, you need air. So you sneak into the garden, a small, overgrown patch behind the kitchens. Lavender, rosemary, nettles. You sit under the twisted fig tree, pull out a piece of scrap parchment and sketch the sky. You draw clouds shaped like saints and sinners, a sun with too many eyes, a bird carrying a broken crown, and then a cough. You freeze. Not Tancred, thank heavens. It's another monk, a tall, awkward one with eyebrows so bushy they deserve their own feast day, Brother Emond. You've seen him around, always scribbling in his own notebook, always muttering to himself like he's trying to remember a dream. He doesn't talk much, but today he sits beside you. He looks at your sketch. He nods. Then he says, "That bird looks like our abbot." You stifle a laugh. He doesn't smile, just pulls a scroll from his robes and hands it to you. It's a map. Or maybe a star chart. There are symbols you don't recognize. Planets, maybe. Zodiac signs. Or possibly soup ingredients drawn in celestial code. He says, "You see better than the rest of us. Draw this for me. Copy it. Make it real." You blink. Not because you don't understand, but because this is the first time anyone's asked you to translate the unseen. Brother Emond adds, "I'll teach you the words later. You already understand the shapes." You take the scroll, and just like that you're a cartographer of the strange. The weeks melt together after that. By day you copy manuscripts, trim candles, sweep the floor badly. By night you help Amin recreate lost diagrams, celestial models, mythical beasts, maps of pilgrim routes that no longer exist. He teaches you Latin, sort of. Mostly through gestures and repetition, and the occasional drawing of an exploding monk when you mix up glory with goat. One evening he tells you a secret. "These diagrams," he whispers, "aren't just for records. They're part of a larger book, a codex for the broken ones, a guide for those who never fit." You stare at him. "Why me?" you finally ask. He says, "Because your mind doesn't obey." You don't know if that's an insult, a compliment, or both. But you like the sound of it. That night you draw until your fingers cramp. A serpent swallowing its tail. A tree with 12 hearts. A face split in half. One side laughing, one side dreaming. The Abbey may never understand you, but maybe that doesn't matter anymore. Maybe what matters is that you're creating, that you exist in ink and firelight, and that somewhere out there someone might hold one of your pages and whisper, "Who was this boy?" And maybe the answer will be someone who saw differently and made beauty from it. Winter creeps in like a silent thief. You feel it first in your fingers. Those same fingers that once danced over parchment now stiffen in the morning, reluctant to move. The scriptorium grows colder each day, breath misting in front of your face as you lean over a manuscript, warming your ink bottle beneath your sleeve. Every so often someone coughs and everyone winces. There's a rumour the frost is bringing plague again. There's always a plague rumour. You're still working with Brother Emmond on the secret codex. It's now dozens of pages long. Symbols, diagrams, curious creatures with heads like compasses and bodies shaped like prayers. You don't know what it means, not completely, but you know it matters. Some of the monks have taken notice. Brother Tancred, of course, is unimpressed. He mutters to others that your drawings are childish heresy and a waste of expensive ink. But the abbot, an old man with shaky hands and surprisingly sharp memory, has taken a different approach. Let the boy draw, he tells the others. Better ink than idle hands. Mainstream historical fact. While the Church often feared innovation, it paradoxically preserved many revolutionary ideas through scribal work. Monasteries were among the few places where strange maps, speculative natural histories, and even astrological charts could survive, sometimes secretly, sometimes wrapped in enough piety to slip past the censors. Still, not everyone's amused. One afternoon, Brother Tancred intercepts you in the cloister walk. His mouth is tight, like he's biting back something sour. He jabs a finger toward the hidden manuscript you've been working on with Emmond. That thing is dangerous, he says. You're putting nonsense into holy hands. You stare at him. He presses closer. You don't understand the risks. Those who see too much end up silenced, or worse. You mumble, "It's just drawings." He leans in, hissing, "Nothing is just anything in this place." And then he's gone, his robe swishing like a warning. You're rattled. But that night, when Brother Emmond brings out the next scroll, you don't hesitate. You keep drawing. Because you've learned something no one told you before. You're not afraid of danger. You're afraid of erasure. Quirky tidbit? Some medieval scribes, especially those with less prestigious duties like margin decoration, would sneak in coded insults or jokes at their patron's expense. There's even a 12th century manuscript that ends with, "Now I've written the whole thing, for God's sake, give me some wine." You think about that a lot. Meanwhile, in the novice dormitory, things are shifting too. The boy who rocks and repeats "bell rings, bread time" suddenly stops. Just one day, he's gone. No one explains. You ask Brother Lucas and he gives a sad shake of the head. His family reclaimed him, he says. They think they can cure him now. You want to ask, cure him of what? But you already know the answer. The others are quieter after that. Even you. Still, you notice something. A new boy arrives. Small, bright eyes. He barely speaks at first, but you recognize the look. The flicker of "not like them" behind the eyes. You sit beside him at supper and share your bread. He doesn't thank you, but he doesn't move away either. You've become the one who knows the quiet path through this place. The one the others look to when Brother Tancred's shadow looms too long. You're not the ghost of the Abbey anymore. You're becoming its strange little soul. Historians still argue whether monasteries were truly safe spaces for the disabled, or simply more polite prisons. Evidence suggests a little of both. There were monks with visible impairments who lived full lives of service, but there were also those locked away, protected into silence. You're walking that line every day. Brother Emmond's health is fading. He limps now, coughs blood into his sleeve when he thinks no one's watching. One night, while you're in the scriptorium alone, you find a folded note in your desk. "If I die, finish the book. Hide it if you must, but finish it." It's signed only with a small drawing, an owl perched on a crooked branch. Your heart tightens. You don't sleep that night. You sketch by candlelight page after page, symbols you've never seen, pages that look like dreams or warnings or both. You don't understand them all, but your hand moves like it knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. The next day, Emmond doesn't rise. The infirmarian says fever. The abbot says God's will. Tancred says nothing, but his smirk is louder than any prayer. You carry on anyway. A week later, you place the finished codex in a wooden box, wrap it in old cloth, and slide it behind a row of forgotten hymnals in the archive. Not hidden forever, just enough, for the right hands. You go back to copying bestiaries after that. More dragons. More lions that supposedly cure diseases by breathing on people. You're not convinced. You add your little creatures in the margins again, quieter this time. But now, when you do it, You're not just decorating, you're leaving a trail, in case someone like you comes looking someday. The snow starts falling by mid-month. The bell sounds softer under the weight of frost, and you, strange boy with strange eyes, finally understand that survival isn't just about food or shelter. It's about carving a space for yourself in a world that never asked for you. And maybe, just maybe, leaving it slightly better than you found it. The thaw doesn't come all at once. At first, it's just a dripping sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like the abbey is exhaling. Then puddles form in the stone courtyard, and the chickens in the garden resume their endless pecking crusade. You watch them through the window of the scriptorium as you mix your inks. Brown from walnut hulls, red from madder root, blue, if you're lucky, from lapis lazuli, smuggled in from the east and worth more than you'll ever be. Colour always made more sense to you than words. Even now, reading Latin is a struggle. But shades, hues, you understand those. Some mornings you wake up with a colour in your head, like a feeling that hasn't been named yet. Today, it's pale gold. Like sunlight through parchment, your brush dips in. You paint. Mainstream historical fact. In the medieval period, illuminated manuscripts weren't just texts. They were expressions of sacred beauty. Monks believed the divine could be glimpsed in brilliant colours and intricate designs. To illuminate a page was, in a way, to praise God with pigments. But your thoughts aren't exactly pious this morning. You're distracted by the way the abbey has changed since Brother Emmond's passing. It's quieter, but not in a comforting way. You hear whispers now when you pass certain monks, the kind of whispers that stick to your back like thistles. You know your work with Emmond wasn't exactly approved. It was tolerated like the rats in the cellars, tolerated until someone decides it's time to lay traps. You catch Brother Tancred eyeing you more often now, not with anger, something worse, curiosity, like he's waiting for you to slip. One evening he approaches your workbench, arms folded. He picks up a page you've just finished, an illuminated M shaped like a blooming tree, and studies it. Beautiful, he says flatly. Did you trace it? You shake your head. He nods slowly, then places the page back down. Shame to waste such talent on nonsense. You don't reply, but you think of the codex, still hidden, still safe, for now. Quirky tidbit? There's a lesser-known medieval tale of a monk who claimed to have been taught calligraphy by an angel who visited him in dreams. The abbot believed him, until he caught the monk copying off a pagan scroll. The punishment? He was made to illuminate every page of the Psalms, with his non-dominant hand. You often wonder which part of that story is the punishment. Back in the dormitory, you notice the new boy has started humming to himself. You smile. You join him. It becomes a ritual. You sit together by the hearth after Vespers, sketching shapes in the soot on the stones. He hums. You doodle. Sometimes you switch roles. He's not great at drawing. His rabbit looks like a melted spoon, but it doesn't matter. You're passing something along, a map of survival. Historians still argue whether communities like yours actually formed among the imperfect monks if they sought each other out, protected one another in secret. Or if that's just a story modern minds want to believe. The records are thin, scattered, maybe because no one thought you were worth writing about. That's always the risk when history is written by the normal. You decide not to let them decide your story. You sneak down to the archives late at night, not to the codex, that's still tucked away, but to the old ledgers, the parchment scraps, the rejected hymnals no one reads. You start adding things, tiny notes in the margins, phrases like, he sang when no one asked, or she made stars from ashes. You're not forging, you're footnoting the forgotten, and no one notices, until someone does. A month later, the abbot calls you into his chambers. You expect a scolding, or worse. Instead, he holds up one of your altered pages. I found this, he says. You brace yourself. Then he looks at you. Not harsh, not kind, just tired. Did you write it? You nod. He pauses. Then, I think it's true. You blink. He sets the page down and pours 2 cups of watered wine. For years, I thought we served the broken, he says. But sometimes I wonder if it's the broken who serve us. You don't know what to say. He raises his cup. To the ones who don't fit. You drink. You leave that room changed. You thought you were alone. You're not. There are others. Quiet allies. old monks who watched your growth with careful eyes. They begin leaving you materials, better vellum, rare pigments, a few precious quills with polished silver nibs, no words, just supplies. That's how kindness works here. Silent, steady, sharp as script. And so you keep working. You finish your duties during the day, copying scriptures, cleaning wax from the chapel floor, mending frayed robes. But at night you draw. You sketch yourself as a tree with mismatched branches, the new boy as a wolf pup curled at your feet, Brother Yemond as a crow perched high, holding a scroll in its beak. You start a new codex. This one is just for you. No theology, no rules, just truth. One page reads, "Some of us see sideways. That doesn't make us lost." You press your palm to that page before you turn it, because it's the first time you've written something and believed it. The world outside the abbey keeps turning. You hear rumours of kings warring, towns burning, distant lands where silk flows like water. But inside these stone walls, your world is small, still, sacred in its own strange way. And you've begun to love it. Not because it welcomed you, but because you made space within it. A crooked little corner with candlelight and colour and truth. Spring doesn't tiptoe in, it struts. Bold green shoots push through the garden beds. Birds shout from the abbey eaves like it's their personal concert hall, and your joints don't creak quite as much when you stretch in the morning. You start waking earlier than the others just to watch the light come in through the eastern windows of the scriptorium, that buttery glow touching the walls like it's forgiving them for surviving another winter. The boy beside you, your unofficial apprentice, though no one calls him that, has begun experimenting with gold leaf. He's not good at it. Not yet. But you show him how to hold his breath when he presses the tiny square down, how to whisper to the page instead of forcing it. He grins when he gets it right. You grin back. One morning you pass by the chapel and see Brother Tancred praying. You don't stop, but something in you shifts. You're not scared of him anymore. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval monasteries, particularly Benedictine ones, the strict hierarchy was occasionally offset by moments of unexpected softness. Feast days when everyone dined as equals, or hours when scribes could work freely without supervision. These glimpses of freedom were rare, but they were real. That week the abbot gives you a task that, years ago, would have made you sob into your lentils. "You'll represent us at the fair," he says. You blink. "Me?" "Yes. The bishop's archivist will be there. Take your best work." It's not a request. You've never left the abbey grounds before, at least not far enough to see other people with real beards and loud voices and no understanding of how to handle someone like you. But the abbot insists, and you're not exactly in the habit of disobeying abbatial orders. The fair is in a town 2 miles away. A real town, with streets that smell like vinegar and sweat, where people shout instead of murmur and children don't stop staring. The moment you arrive, you want to crawl back into the herb garden and disappear. But you don't. Instead, you set up your little booth, a borrowed trestle table, a clean cloth, and 5 of your favourite illuminated pages. You stack them like offerings. Within an hour, people are crowding around. They don't ask about your walk, or your face, or the way your hand trembles slightly when you reach for your quill. They ask, "Did you do this?" You nod. They ask, "Can you do one for me?" You pause, then nod again. You're commissioned, right there, by a merchant's wife who wants a family crest drawn for her eldest son, then a clerk, then a knight squire. You can hardly keep track. By midday your fingers are ink-stained and cramped, but your mouth won't stop smiling. Quirky tidbit? During medieval fairs, it wasn't just traders who came to sell. Monks and nuns would often participate, selling prayer scrolls, medicinal herbs, and occasionally, yes, artwork. There's even record of one nun who became famous for painting St. Brigid with what modern scholars suspect was the face of her actual girlfriend. Her work was mysteriously lost by the 14th century. You return to the abbey with more than coins. You return with pride. And when Brother Tancred passes you in the corridor that night, he doesn't sneer, he nods. A nod. From him. You could frame it. Historians still argue whether people with disabilities in the Middle Ages could ever truly ascend socially. There are glimpses, disabled saints, visionaries, even artists, but most examples are isolated, unconnected. Still, In this moment, you've climbed higher than anyone expected you to. Back at your workbench, you begin drafting something new. Not a codex, not a saint's tale. It's a letter to no one in particular, or maybe to someone centuries from now. It begins, "If you're reading this, then they didn't erase us." You tuck it behind a binding. No one sees. Not yet. A week later, you're invited to supper with the senior scribes. You nearly drop your spoon when they ask your opinion on a colour blend. One even laughs at your joke about dragons being overrated. They're just armoured cats with a fire problem, you say. You leave supper lightheaded, not from wine, from belonging. That night your apprentice, the boy who used to flinch at bells, brings you a drawing. It's messy, but it's of you. A tree with eyes, roots tangled into scrolls, and a little owl perched on a branch. You cry a little, but you don't tell him that. You just ruffle his hair and say, "Needs more stars." He nods, as if he expected that. You think of Brother Emmond, of the crooked codex you hid in the archives, of the notes you left in the margins, the ones only someone like you would understand. You realise now, you were the codex all along, illegible to some, but luminous to others. And maybe that's enough. It starts with a cough, just one, from the baker's youngest boy. But by the time word reaches the abbey, the whole town is shuttering windows and boiling water. You know the signs before the abbot says it. Sickness has returned. And this one is fast. The monks fall quiet in the corridors. No more idle humming or debating whether St. Jerome had anger issues. They whisper now, heads together like frightened sparrows. The infirmary is stocked with dried sage and vinegar-soaked rags, but you've seen this before. When you were small, when you lost your mother, you remember the smell of wet wool and sweet rot. Mainstream historical fact. Disease was a constant companion in the Middle Ages, particularly in monastic communities. With their enclosed spaces, shared tools and tight quarters, infection spread rapidly. Monks often cared for the sick directly. But it was a gamble. Some survived. Many did not. This time, it's not just monks. Your apprentice, the boy who drew you as a tree, goes pale by the second day. You sit by his cot, wiping sweat from his brow, whispering stories you half make up just to keep him tethered. Stories about dragons who only eat bread crusts, or saints who hiccup when they lie. He chuckles once, then sleeps. You don't move for hours. The abbot tells you not to worry, that he's young, resilient. But you know too much about fragile things. By the fourth day, the cough has reached the senior scribes. Brother Tancred collapses during Lauds. No one mocks him for it. Not anymore. You help where you can, delivering herbs, burning soiled linens, writing names on wooden markers. It becomes your new illumination, just with fewer colours. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval monks believed illnesses were caused by demons entering through the nose or mouth. Hence the practice of sleeping with garlic in your mouth or wearing sacks of mint around your neck. One particularly inventive abbot once ordered his monks to chant non-stop for a full day to bore the demons out of the sick. It mostly led to hoarse voices and more sick monks. You try chanting anyway, just in case. The boy doesn't get worse, but he doesn't get better, and the abbey begins to thin. There's a quiet reckoning that sweeps over the halls, a realization that not everyone will see another spring. Some monks confess things they never dared say. One admits he never believed in purgatory. Another confesses he's always liked to smell beeswax more than bread. You, oddly, feel calm, like you've already lived through your apocalypse and came out the other side still sketching dragons on firewood. Historians still argue whether people in the Middle Ages experienced mass illness with resignation or terror. Some sources show panic and fleeing, others show deep serenity, especially among monks. It's possible both are true, that humans are complicated like that. One evening, as the sun slants through the chapel windows in those long, syrupy beams that make you think God might be flirting, you find the abbot sitting alone. He's thinner now, his hands shake. "I read your codex," he says quietly. Your heart stutters. He smiles. "Don't look so horrified. I didn't burn it." You say nothing, he continues. "I think you're right. Some of us do see sideways." You sit beside him. He turns to you. "Promise me something." You nod. "Keep writing, even if no one reads it. Especially then." You nod again, slower this time. When you stand to leave, he reaches for your sleeve. "And take care of the boy. He trusts you." He dies 2 days later. You bury him beneath the elder tree. No grand markers, just a strip of linen tied around the trunk. You think he'd have liked that. The boy begins to stir again, bit by bit, sips of broth, soft words. You tell him the story of the garlic monks. He laughs until he coughs, and then glares at you. You whisper, "Worth it." By the 7th week, the fever breaks. The sickness leaves as fast as it came, and you're left in the after. The quiet is heavier now, not the silence of prayer or cold mornings, but the hush of absence, of laughter that no longer bounces off the stone, of pages half-inked, of robes no longer filled. But there is something else too, survivors, not just the boy, a dozen monks, you among them, and you realise you're not a ghost, you're not a mistake, you're a witness. You gather the codex, the secret one. You add new pages, names of the lost, things they said, small kindnesses they offered, the kind of history that wouldn't make it into chronicles or relic books, but mattered just the same. You draw the abbot as a candle melting into the shape of a heart, Brother Tancred as a crow holding a mint sprig in his beak, your apprentice as a shooting star trailing gold behind him, and you draw yourself last. Not a tree this time, a lantern, cracked, but still glowing. You live longer than anyone expected. Not that they ever said it aloud, but you could see it in their eyes, the way they hesitated when assigning you long-term tasks, or how the infirmarian used to leave extra herbs by your cot, just in case. You weren't supposed to be a fixture. You were supposed to fade quietly, like a scribble in the margins. But here you are, year after year, season after season, and the abbey has changed around you. The boy, no longer quite a boy, is now chief scribe. His fingers are sure, his eyes always darting to you before signing off on anything. He never calls you master, just you. But there's reverence in it, like the way he brings you fresh ink before you ask, or how he always saves you the best stool by the window. You haven't walked into the garden in weeks. Your joints don't like it anymore, but you still watch it. The herbs are taller now. The rosemary's wild. Someone planted new yarrow beside the thyme. You smile when you spot it. That was your idea long ago, when your knees didn't groan quite so loudly and your thoughts didn't drift off mid-sentence. Mainstream historical fact. Older monks who survived into late adulthood, especially those with chronic illnesses or disabilities, were often assigned roles that required less physical exertion. Dictation, corrections, mentoring young scribes. Their wisdom was valued, but their infirmity quietly accepted. Some were even honoured with ceremonial titles like memory keeper. You become exactly that. The keeper of old stories, the abbey's anchor. Every few days someone drops by to ask, "Do you remember?" And you almost always do. Like how Brother Reynold once mistook soap for cheese, or how the abbot, long gone now, used to hum the same 3-note tune whenever he was deep in thought. You remember, and you write. Not as fast as before, but steadier. Quirky tidbit. One monk in the 12th century kept a secret book of jokes tucked behind the Psalms. It included such gems as, "Why did the rooster go to matins?" To escape the nun with the spinning wheel. Monks weren't always solemn. They had humour even in shadows. You chuckle thinking about it. You imagine your apprentice slipping a few of your doodles into the official archives, just to mess with future historians. A saint holding a cat, a dragon with spectacles, a monk dancing with a skeleton. You hope they survive. Historians still argue whether personal expression among monks was tolerated or quietly erased. We know of individual styles, marginalia, commentary, but rarely do we see their names. It's possible they were both cherished and forgotten. That's the bittersweet paradox of cloistered life. One cold morning, you wake up with a heaviness in your chest. Not pain, just slowness. Like your body is trying to remember how to move. You don't go to the scriptorium, you stay in bed, wrapped in wool, your old tunic folded neatly nearby. You listen to the abbey breathe around you, pages turning, sandals on stone, someone whistling out of tune. You know, and you're not afraid. You ask for one thing, your codex, the one no one knows you kept finishing. Your apprentice brings it. You add one last line just beneath the sketch of your own weathered face. Some things were beautiful, even when broken. Then you close the book. The next morning the abbey wakes without you. They lay you in the chapel with soft candles and silence. Your apprentice tucks a page beneath your hands, your drawing of him as a star. You'd be annoyed, probably. It's not archival quality parchment, but still, you'd be touched, and you'd forgive him. You're buried beneath the elder tree next to the abbot. A stone is placed, but the real memory is in the codex. It circulates quietly among the scribes, not as doctrine, but as legacy. You're not forgotten. Not this time. And centuries later, some bored historian flipping through an old archive finds a page, a lantern, cracked, still glowing. They pause, they wonder, they don't know your name, but they feel it. So here you are, back in your own bed, centuries away from that abbey, the snow, the ink, and the boy who once drew you as a tree. You're warm, you're safe. And whether or not you remember the names of the monks, or the shape of the scriptorium's windows, a part of you felt it all. That quiet resistance, that stubborn survival. You didn't just learn about history tonight. You felt what it meant to be seen, even in a world that wasn't built for you. The candles are low now, the dragons have settled, and the codex is closed. Let the scent of rosemary and beeswax linger a little longer. Let the wind from that distant winter garden drift through your thoughts like a lullaby. And if you listen closely, you might still hear the turning of a page, the scratch of a quill, the quiet whisper of someone who lived, really lived, when they weren't supposed to. You survived the Middle Ages, even with Down syndrome, and maybe, just maybe, you are the most luminous part of it. Sleep easy now, you've earned it.